5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
offtheropes.com. What's your legacy?
Hi, and thanks for joining me for the Off the Ropes podcast. I'm Victoria, and I'll be presenting a weekly show bringing you some of the world's most inspiring individuals, but not just those who have achieved enormous success, specifically those who have endured hardship and adversity and overcame their challenges. Plus, I'll be speaking with experts in the field of nutrition, health, fitness, and personal development to extract their wisdom on how to optimize your performance, fulfill your potential, and learn how to get your life off the ropes. On today's show, I speak with Michael Kacer, a former US soldier whose deployment to Afghanistan in 2008 proved fateful. The victim of a rocket attack which claimed the lives of his two close friends, Michael sustained severe and life-changing injuries. Injuries he was not expected to recover from. Yet due to his astonishing determination and extraordinary positivity, he did recover, and even though he lost his left arm, he believes his life is now much richer than it was prior to the attack. He attributes sport to be his personal saviour, and this month he'll represent his country in the second Invictus Games at Orlando. If he can't inspire you to get off the sofa of comfort, no one can. Let's meet Michael Kacer. Michael, it's June the 18th, 2008. You're relaxing with friends, playing cards after a day's patrol in Afghanistan, when you hear a familiar whistling sound. Can you describe what happened next?
For the longest time, I actually thought I was playing spades, and I just found out up till this year, on June 18th, 2008, we were just sitting around the little room that we're in, and the reaction I thought I had wasn't what the reality was. And what I thought actually happened was that I got up and started running towards the door. And one of my friends a couple years ago sent me the picture, and I realized that if I had got up and ran, everything I sustained would have either been to my back or to the right side of my body. And that's where I came to the conclusion that I never moved.
You never moved. So what actually happened?
There's three things that happen in a series of immediate reaction. It's called fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
For the longest time, and I never really understood the freeze part, but it makes complete sense. And what happened was I just pretty much heard the noise. My brain reacted, but my body just froze.
Right, yeah.
And the rocket came through, landed on the windowsill about 10 feet to the left of me, blowing the windowsill to the inside of the room. And I ended up with a 6-inch skull fracture in the back of my head. Ear to ear was fractured in 24 different places. My jaw was broken 3 broke ribs, 2 collapsed, severed intestine, and my left arm got mangled. Going from the stories that, from what people tell me, what I remember, trying to keep the common denominator of what everybody has as one story, I pretty much, and the first couple moments are kind of still scrambled, but I remember coming to and looking around the room and not seeing anything. I remember sitting down on a cot and doing a self-assessment and realizing that I was having a really hard time breathing, but I didn't come to terms yet that my lungs were collapsed.
Right.
I ended up looking down on my stomach, and I thought the puncture wound was a little up higher. So immediately I thought my stomach was severed. So I was thinking stomach acid eating from the inside out and whatnot. I realized my face was injured.
So despite all of this, you actually had quite lucid, rational thoughts in such a traumatic moment.
Yeah, and if up until this point, if anybody was to tell me that after something like this happened, they really had clear, concise thought and acknowledgement of what was going on around them, I would call them a liar. Only because I've experienced it firsthand. It's amazing how the brain works. And especially to have such clear cognitive thought, and at the same time your brain shut down all your pain sensory. The way the mind works, it's just completely unbelievable.
Do you remember what happened afterwards? How you got from there to hospital?
I blacked out, and I ended up blacking out, or going unconscious.
Yeah.
I actually made it outside the room. As soon as I made it outside the door, I slid down. In the process, one of the guys was running from the vehicle to the building at that time. He was a real young guy. I think he was at most 22. I think he was like 21 or 19.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there. I remember him asking, just kind of like freezing on what to do. He's the one that put the tourniquet on me. He stayed by my side almost the whole time that I can recall. Just trying to wish there was something more that he could do. I remember passing out and somebody laid me down on the ground, and one of my guys, I remember him yelling at everybody because he could hear the wheezing in my lungs, and I remember being woken up to him screaming at people as he's jarring me up against the wall. Like, he underhooked my arms and just lifted me up and slammed me against the wall. Maybe that's where the 6-inch skull fracture came from. Back of my head, I'm not sure. But,
yeah, cheers, buddy.
Even if that's the case, he helped. It was just one of many little things that just played right in order for me to, like, my motto that I go by is, I was granted today because I didn't have tomorrow. So I have to make the best of today.
Beautiful. I read that you weren't actually expected to survive, and that your family were making preparations to fly over to Germany for the last rites. How quickly did you actually physically recover?
Stateside, my family found, even though I got hit on June 18th, and that's the date I go by it, because of the time zones, my family goes 17th.
Okay, sure.
So probably for the first 3 years, it was until we actually realized the time zone difference. Me and my family, hey, I got hit all the time. And I realized that the 17th and 18th at the same time were the same day. But to help keep the timeline a little straighter, on June 17th is when I got hit. Okay. Stateside.
Yeah.
I came out of my coma on June 21st, stateside, which would have been probably about 3 or 4 days later. And the first probably 2 weeks, I really don't remember anything.
Yeah,
people, and I feel really bad because I know so many people came and visited me, and images, I mean, partially my vision is horribly bad without corrective lenses. Okay. So between that and the medication, and everything else, everybody that came and visited me, it was like I can remember recognizing their voice at the time. Don't remember seeing anybody. Okay. And I remember when people come, like I run into people and they're like, yo, like it was so hard seeing you down Walter Reed. Yeah. And I don't even, like, I cannot recall. Is this somebody that's just trying to play to my injury and get on my good side and like ride my coat? Or is somebody that's genuinely came down and visited me? Is this somebody who's actually part of the community that supported? And fortunately, for as close as I was to home, I was probably, if you got in a car and drove, I was probably about 3, maybe 4 hours tops. Okay. Being home. So I was a part of a very fortunate community or a small population that actually people willing to drive to come visit them. Yeah. Not only friends, family, strangers. There are people that I don't think I've ever met in my life before that drove down from my hometown area and were like, hey, we read the article in the newspaper and we're just coming to visit you. We just want to say
Wow.
thank you and know that the community back home supports you.
Yeah, brilliant. And how much do you think that support aided your recovery?
There's no way to put that on a scale. There really isn't. And not only the support they gave me physically, the support they gave me financially to help my family come down.
Oh, fabulous, yeah.
I might own my house, and literally people were volunteering and just showing up at my house to mow my lawn, to help walk my dogs, to help maintain my property. And there's still people in the community that I've never had the opportunity to say thank you to, except in a newspaper article, because I don't know who they are, but they've helped me maintain my property and helped me upkeep my life when at a time and point where I still didn't know how long it was going to take me to recover or what my future was going to look like.
Yeah. And whilst you don't know who they know who they are, isn't it? And the most important thing when helping people is you do so to help that person. You know, in an ideal world, people don't help because they want thanks. They'll know in their heart, won't they, that they've helped. And I think that's okay. Although I can understand you'd actually like to reach out and say thank you in person. But Michael, do you ever feel vengeful about events that happened? Or did you ever, in the initial aftermath, did you feel vengeful?
As per what happened to me, there are several stages that people are supposed to go through in the grieving process. And I kind of jumped on that I can remember, just jumped right into the acceptance stage. I just accepted the fact that my arm was gone. Okay. There is no heat. There is no feelings that could ever make it come back. My sister told me that there were several times, like I actually did go through a grieving process because I would just sit there and look at my arm being wrapped up and just completely start breaking down and crying. She's like, I've never really seen you get mad or angry. You would just look at your arm and cry. And post that, I lost my medic and mechanic.
Yeah.
And my medic was 19. His name was Brett Meyer. And I lost my mechanic, whose name was Bud Tolles. Both of them left behind wife, family, fiance, and family. And for the longest time, the person I was mad at and the person I was guilty at was myself. I never really held the outside powers that be guilty. I never held people who fired the rockets accountable. The only person that was accountable was me because I couldn't protect them. I couldn't get them out of the building. And that's probably the hardest part of my recovery that I've had to deal with.
And how have you dealt with that?
It took about 6 years for me to finally come to terms with realizing that mental health is more of a tool than it is a burden. And there's this huge stigma that if you get mental health, if you go talk to a psychiatrist, if you use groups, that you're weak, you can't be a leader. There's this underlying thought that you lose a little bit more of yourself. And what I came to realize once I started mental health, all these years I've been skipping out on mental health, it's actually made me a lot weaker. It's made me a lot more emotional, numb, and have this disconnect to the point of where not only was my family starting to not realize who I was, but I was not realizing who I was.
Yeah, of course. It's so much tougher than people think to actually embrace that side of yourself. And I think especially with men, if I hope to offend anybody, but generally with men who are expected obviously to always be tough, perhaps not as emotional as we'd like them to be, but actually looking into that very dark side internally is much, much, much harder. And I don't think enough people realize that.
No. And through sports, I started regaining a lot of self-confidence that I lost. I started regaining a lot more self-esteem. And when I started regaining all of that from doing marathons, from doing Tough Mudders, I believe you have Tough Mudders over in the
We
UK.
do. Yeah, we do.
I don't know if you have Spartan races. They're a little shorter distance,
Yes.
but along the same timeline.
I believe so.
So I got into the obstacle course races. I got into the marathons. And I started doing the Warrior Games, representing the Army side of competition. And from that's where I started regaining all the self-confidence, all the self-esteem. But behind closed doors and all the accolades and the medals, I was hiding everything, using everything to hide everything that was going on inside. And as much as sports has helped me, it really helped push the door during a race.
Yeah.
After I got done, I won, and I just still felt so incomplete.
Do you know why?
Because I wasn't dealing with, everybody tried to make me out to be this hero in this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when I look now, how I'm the unofficial face of the Invictus Games.
Yes,
or
I
guess
see.
I guess it's not really the unofficial face, but my face is everywhere.
Yes.
And part of me still feels like that picture embodies the spirit of the games, and it embodies everything and the triumph that I've had to overcome, but it really doesn't express the journey. Like, it shows the success without the trail. And not that it's a bad thing, but I don't think it's expressed enough how hard it was and the trials and tribulations I've had to go through to get there. So everybody automatically sees this photo and thinks, oh my God, this guy's amazing. And what they don't realize is pretty much every day I wake up, it's the same struggle. It gets a little easier every day now that I've started coming to terms with everything. But every day is still the same struggle with depression, the same struggle for drive. And even though I have such great optimism on what the day is, these gray areas still cloud the mind and creep in. And it's a constant battle between, I guess you could say, good and evil, and just finding the best outcome to have.
So despite feeling that upon waking up, you are still managing to get up and go on and achieve enormous things. How exactly, what is your specific technique for getting you up and getting on?
I have a set goal in mind. How I'm going to get there, I'm still trying to figure out. And I've come to terms with, because of my traumatic brain injury, some of my goals may not be achievable. It doesn't mean I'm going to try any less. It doesn't mean that I'm just going to give up on others, even if I fail. But it's knowing that, and it's the basic 3 to 5 year plan. Where do you want to be in 3 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Sure.
And waking up every day, once I started coming to terms with everything, it was, my main goal is Rio. My immediate 3 to 5 year plan is train for Rio, achieve Rio. About 2 years ago, I started coming to terms with, Rio's going to come, Rio's going to go. Where am I going to be in life when that door shuts? Whether I make the team or not. And if I don't succeed in making the U.S. team, how am I going to feel? Am I going to feel as a failure, or am I going to feel like, even though I didn't make the team, it's still success because I've left everything out there?
Yeah, indeed.
And it's really a matter of finding a perspective that you can be happy with, knowing that the outcome, no matter what, you've left 110% out there. For me, it's driving for that Paralympic goal, trying to be that light for the gray area that people can't quite seem to understand, and try and connect the dots for a lot of the community. So not only, because so much of the community wants to help us, but the community doesn't know how. And sometimes the biggest thing is just saying, being there in support. And my end goal is to be a gym teacher.
Mm-hmm.
My back plan is either working at a government job part-time throughout the year,
Mm-hmm.
or being a physical trainer.
So,
And
so you've always got, that's probably surely to do with your military background. You always have a contingency. So I'll go down this road. If this doesn't work, then I will go down this road. And I think that's an enormously helpful tip to anybody, that we can, there's that saying where you can shoot for the moon and you might get the stars, or something like that, which is a fantastic way of going after any goal, isn't it? That's fantastic. So without sport in your life, where do you think you'd be now?
That's a really hard question to answer. And part of me thinks I would find a different technique. I would find a different way of life. I've watched people try and do sports and it's not helped them at all. But then all of a sudden they turn towards music, or they turn towards drawing in art. I've seen people turn towards cooking, not so much on the eating aspect, but I've also then seen those who turn toward eating.
Yeah, yeah.
So once you find your niche, and this is what I tell everybody, like for me, it was sports. And I think, honestly, if it wasn't for sports, I still would have found something that would have given me drive, something that would have given, that I'm still passionate about.
Okay.
And fortunately for me, I'm able to put my life towards that athletic goal. But you don't need to shoot for making the U.S. team, or having a cooking show, or making it big in the music industry.
Yeah.
You need to find what keeps you happy and finding a way to integrate that into your everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you can do that, and it's not just polytrauma, or it's advice for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all go through our own struggles. We all go through our same issues. Some of us worse than others. But at the end of the day, we all, I think pretty much the human race as a whole fights the same struggle.
Yeah, of course.
And it's a matter of just finding those little things that keep you happy. So when you do hit those gray and dark areas, you can kind of turn towards that and bring a little bit of happiness back into life and jumpstart the endorphins.
That's fantastic advice. With one of the things with for some people, that seeking the things that make them happy are unfortunately things which can ultimately make them worse, like alcohol or drugs or harmful addictions. And there's a short-term gain there, but a long-term loss. Have you experienced anything like that?
Pretty much my whole adult life, alcohol was my vice. When I didn't know how to handle things, when I didn't know how to comprehend things, it used to start off with, that's just how I socialized. And then it turned into, that's how I hid from everything. Mm-hmm. And even in early post-injury, I would literally drink the night away and take pride in knowing that I could still run a marathon leaving the bar an hour before.
Okay.
And I didn't see a problem with it. Mm. And when I look back now, I'm not going to say that people encouraged me, but at the same time and point, you have to respect the boundaries, because if you push somebody too hard to go in a direction to correct themselves, sometimes you push them further down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, yeah.
And people would bring it to my attention, but they really wouldn't push the envelope too much, just specifically for that. And those close to me did push it, and I was in denial about how bad I was. It was just a matter of one life event, one day, one trigger. You just kind of, something happens and you realize if you don't change life soon, you're going to end up being where you should have been 8 years ago, which is 6 feet under.
And do you recall your darkest day, the point where you actually thought, I can't sink any lower?
I hit a couple of them. One of them was, I remember my nephew, and it was within a matter of a couple of weeks. My whole family has helped my sister raise her 3 kids, and my sister's oldest son, my oldest nephew, me and him got into it, and I don't even remember exactly over what, but it was just a regular PTSD outlash.
Right.
And my nephew turned around towards me and said, listen, I understand you're going through a lot of issues, but that doesn't mean you have to take it out on us. And I mean, paraphrasing and making a long story short, and it really struck a chord with me.
How old was he?
At the time, he was probably about 15.
Okay.
It was about 3 years into injury.
Right.
And minus deployments, I feel like I was the main male staple in his life.
I see.
So for him to actually say something like that to me, it made me realize, wow, how much damage am I doing and I don't even realize.
Yeah, of course.
And I wasn't ready for mental health yet, but I still tried to get it, and I fought it, and I kind of let it just slip through my fingers. Rather than accepting it, I kind of just let it go. And shortly thereafter, I remember being at a bar with my sisters. I think both my sisters were out and me. And we went home. And the last thing I remember is falling asleep on the couch. And it was probably around midnight. And I don't know how I ended up at my girlfriend's house. I don't know what transpired. I don't know how I got drunk. But I remember just waking up, bawling my eyes out, completely annihilated. Like, with no recognition of how I got there. And one of my buddies was in Qatar, and this guy I got injured with ended up going over to Qatar to go visit our unit.
Okay.
And my buddy, not realizing the downward spiral that it was going to send me into, was like, oh, so-and-so can come out to Kuwait and meet with us, but you sit back and just sit home instead of coming to join us.
Right, yeah.
And looking at it any other day, under any other circumstance, I would probably throw something back and be like, to be politically correct, you're a jerk, you don't know what you're talking about, blah, 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 and probably try and hit him, all puns intended, as hard as he hit me.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, it just triggered. It was the wrong moment, the wrong time, maybe something mixed with something on TV, and it just short-wired me. And all I could think about was, first I ended up leaving my medic and mechanic behind to die, and now all of a sudden here my guys are getting redeployed and I can't join them.
Yeah.
And I ended up, like I said, in the downward spiral. I started getting into mental health. I started trying to better myself, but I still battled alcoholism really bad. One of the biggest defining moments with the alcoholism was my girlfriend's father had passed away, and still being emotionally inept, I didn't know how to handle it. And I was doing really good not drinking for quite a time frame. I think I had, for me it was quite a time frame. I think I had about 4 or 5 months under my belt, maybe.
Okay.
With everything going on, just not knowing how to emotionally connect to somebody through loss, because I shut down emotionally so much.
Yeah.
And anytime I did, it just brought me back to my medic and mechanic, and I didn't want to feel that.
Yeah, of course.
Just drinking myself to the bottom of the barrel. And she said something, and it made me really feel emasculated. And instead of just letting everything go, I lashed out. And it wasn't fair to her. It wasn't fair to me. It wasn't fair to any of her family members that heard it or saw it. It was the first time that, in a long time, that I felt ugly. Probably in about 2 years since I lashed out on my nephew. And that's where I really realized I need to stop drinking. I need to get a hold of myself mentally. I need to get a hold of myself emotionally. And it's time for me to get mental health for all the right reasons. Not because everybody's telling me, but because I'm ready.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head perfectly there, haven't you? And, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, can you? And, whilst on one level you knew that that's what you needed to do, if you weren't 100% committed and 100% convinced that you needed to do it, your heart's not in it, and it would have failed anyway. So from that point, did you actually then start to make a recovery?
Mentally, it's still a long process. I've learned a lot of techniques in this treatment, and I don't know if it's a United States thing or worldwide. I wish I was more knowledgeable on it, so I really hate sounding ignorant, but here in the U.S., it's called cognitive
behavioral therapy.
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
CBT, yeah, we use that here a lot as well.
Perfect. So to the listeners who don't understand what cognitive behavior therapy is, basically it focuses on one trauma event, then it has you walk through the steps, how you feel in that moment, why you relate to it, why does it hurt so bad, and then it breaks it down into the who, what, why, where do I feel so guilty and bad about this happening when I had no control over the event. Yeah,
of course.
And that's the meat and potatoes of it. And once I started that, it's a 12-week program.
Okay.
Along the way, it gives you a lot of techniques on how to deal with things when they come up. And since then, and using them, it's really made a huge difference in my life, mentally, emotionally, and physiologically. And now I truly do push out, in trying to be an advocate for mental health, because nobody wants to get it, because how we portray people to look at us. And the case is that it actually makes you stronger as a person, and when people hear it, they actually look at you in the complete opposite of how you think they're going to look at you.
I see. Can you give us an example of a technique that you actually use? So should something trigger, a memory be triggered by someone inadvertently, what technique do you apply to stop you hurting or stop you lashing out?
The pain never really goes away. It just gets easier to deal with. And one of the biggest parts I've used, and somebody the other day wrote in one of the veteran groups about how he was talking to a little kid, and it sent him into a downward spiral for hours, just mentally. And one of the biggest techniques I go through, sometimes I write down, sometimes I don't. Actually, the majority of the time I don't, but in my head I just go through the same process of what is this event to me and why am I feeling this way? In the beginning, I always wrote it down and literally put a couple lines of paper, a couple of spaces in between each line. So this way I could go back. And when I go to reread it later on, or once I get done writing everything out, rereading what I just went through. How does it make me feel? Why am I feeling this way? And then I'll put little excerpts underneath the original writing, leaving that third line blank. And then going through it one last time and just rereading it. And normally by the third or fourth time I read it, I come to realize how, I don't want to say how stupid, but how the mentality changes and the beliefs seem to get easier to handle. Pain doesn't stop, and it doesn't really ever go away. It just becomes easier to handle.
Yeah, it's like looking at fear directly in the face, isn't it? And actually confronting fear instead of hiding from fear actually diminishes it.
Yeah.
So from there, next month, you'll represent the US at the second Invictus Games in Orlando. For those who aren't familiar with the Invictus Games, can you explain a little bit more about them?
Okay, the Invictus Games spawned from the United States creating the Warrior Games. And what the Warrior Games is the Warrior Games pits every service branch against each other. So in the United States, we have the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and then we have Special Ops.
Yeah.
So we take all 5 of those groups and put them together in a Paralympic-style competition of track and field, archery, air rifle, wheelchair basketball, and seated volleyball, and rifle shooting.
Yeah.
Then, and that started back in 2010. I believe it was in 2012 when we first initially invited over a British team to come compete with us.
Ah, I see.
Not medal count, but just friendly competition. Hey, let's keep this. Let's try and broaden it a little bit. We didn't want to go international with it, or maybe didn't know how to.
Yeah, sure.
Or have support to. But the second year, in my last year, 2013, Prince Harry came over.
Wow.
I've actually had the opportunity to meet him 3 different times, and all 3 times I'm like, yep, I'm going to be that bloke that doesn't remember who your name is.
That's so funny.
And
Brilliant.
He's laughed about it, and he's joked, and then we go to take the pictures, and I realize I treat him like a regular American. I go to put my arm around him, and then I realize,
I love that.
That's
He won't be used to that.
That's a no-go.
That's
and afterwards, I'll apologize and be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot." Like the U.S. customs aren't quite the same as
no, not quite as stiff as us.
Yeah, and he would laugh, and he's like, "Nope, it's fine." He's like, "I don't mind it," but he saw something that came from sports. He's seen something that came from accomplishing a feat, the camaraderie of coming together. And even though, granted, I'm trying to beat you, and for the next 30 seconds, like, I really have nothing but animosity for you. Or at least that's how I try to be. But the second the race is over, it's going back to laughing and joking and this bond that just kind of happens. And he saw the opportunity to take what was this one country's idea of motivation and trying to push and inspire people, not only of military, but able bodies, other people with disabilities, to push their limits, to redefine themselves, to have this unconquered spirit and broadcast it. And he went home and turned it into an international competition of 15 countries and over 500 injured, wounded, and ill service members, all generations, to come out, compete against each other. There's no trophies. There's no what country does the best, and I'm sure countries keep a medal count.
Oh yeah.
So in our heads, it's like, yeah, we won.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like individually, like the athletes kind of do it too, and we try and keep in our head count, like how many medals went to where. But at the end of the day, it's not about the winning. It's the medals are just a plus side.
Yeah.
And it's it really is the way the process goes, because there are some countries that don't have big programs for adaptive sports, especially for veterans, and they don't know how to develop them, or they don't have a big enough community. So, like Afghanistan only had, I think, 3 people there in 2012. There's some countries that just didn't have the numbers to compete against larger countries like Denmark or US or Great Britain, France. So in order to keep everything honest and fair, the Invictus Games committee said, okay, well, certain events, certain countries just aren't going to be able to compete in, to help allow other countries of smaller numbers have a chance of medaling.
Yeah.
And at first it was like, that's bollocks, because I know I could win a gold.
Oh yeah.
And that's where I started realizing, like, as much as I want to showcase and win a medal, it's not about the medal. It's not about placing. It's not about doing as many events as you can. Granted, I do like 9, but for me, I do it because I want to showcase the diversity of abilities that can come of something bad.
Yeah, and what's actually possible, what actually can be achieved.
Right.
What events will you be competing in May?
This May, as of right now, I'll be on the track side. I will be doing the 100, 200, and possibly 1,500 and one of the 2 relays.
Wow. Okay.
And I'll also be throwing shot put and discus. And then I'll be rowing both the 1 minute and 4 minute time trials. And then on the second to last day, but my last day of competition, be swimming the 50 free, 50 breast, 50 back, and 100 free.
Good Lord. And I know you said medals. You don't do it for the medals, but do you have any goals in your mind regarding medals? Is it gold for every single event?
Honestly, it's not about the gold for me. It's honestly about what's called, a lot of athletes call the trifecta. And it's getting that gold, silver, bronze accumulation.
Okay.
So, and that's one reason, and I kind of regret it now that I didn't run the 1,500 back in 2012. I dropped it for the relay. And it's one of those things I wish I picked up on because I missed out on my gold. Granted, the record book shows it, but it's not quite the same. But I dropped the 1,500 for the relay, and then some politics got involved, and then I got dropped from the relay last minute. And I really, if I could go back and have any regret, it would be to rerun the 1,500. And there are 3 people that were running it. So it's called a -1 system. If you have 3 people running, only 2 medals are given out. And honestly, I would have ran and shot for that gold. And if the gold slipped away from me, I probably would have stopped and let the other 2 finish just so they can medal and I come in last place, just so they would have had the ability to, all 3 of them medal.
Yeah, of course.
And all 3 of them been able to take something home. And that's what the games are about. That's what's embodied by it. You see everybody come together, everybody push, everybody kind of go out of their way to help build self-esteem and build this accomplishment and of support. And that's the biggest thing, is being able to have a community where you can support one another, knowing that you're not the only one out there going through these same issues and that you are understood, even if you don't feel like it at times.
So it pretty much replicates the atmosphere that you would have been used to in the army then, as that camaraderie and looking out for one another and that family unit.
It truly does. And there's no other way to explain it. And I'm sure in the art community and in the music industry, there's similar camaraderies. I don't know enough about it because I'm not that talented in those fields.
Sure.
But I know in the sports world, it really is a family away from your family. And the support you get from one another, even people you're going up against, it's truly amazing. And the feeling you get afterwards, knowing that you left everything out there, you don't need a medal to have that feeling. It's just a bonus. And the pride you get from having your family, having your friends, having your community, representing your nation in a competition like this, knowing that even if you don't succeed medally, you've already won. So what does it matter?
Of course, absolutely. Do you get nervous beforehand?
Can I lie and say no?
Are you on the toilet before you do to race?
All the time. And especially this year, and that's what my biggest thing is, being the face.
The pressure. Yeah.
And I live up to the hype. There's a lot of hype going out there between swimming and rowing. The pictures just keep circulating. Every time I think, all right, I'm done, the flag brought to the United States, and we're sitting on the Invictus, and all of a sudden half the ship is my face, and it's like, am I going to be able to live up to this hype? And it gets nerve-wracking. And then I overdo it because I feel like I have something to prove. I have something to strive for. And I've talked to several of my teammates about it, some more than others, and all of them keep telling me the same thing. And they're like, some of these people watched me compete since 2010, other 2012, 13. Some I'd never met up until the Invictus Games in 2014, and all of them say the same thing. And that's, as long as you just do you with the charisma and your attitude and how you have fun, your contacts, everything you do, just to be you. They're like, it'll take care of itself. And just remember that there is no hype to live up to because you are the hype. Like, whether it's me or Miguel Mapp, who's the next probably poster child of it with the seated volleyball and bobsled. Like, there's opportunities post this to continue. And if not, like, it's okay. Even if you, in my case, you don't succeed, it's all right. Miguel, he finished in the top 10 and a bobsled team for the first year of his world circuit of adaptive bobsledding. And like, you can't touch that. For the first time ever breaking the top 10. Like, great to see.
Why do you race specifically?
It initially started because I was running from everything. Okay. It was a way to get out a lot of internal anger and a lot of internal hate. And then I realized how much power I had in competing, how much passion I have as I speak about competition and being the voice of using it as a coping mechanism. And it's not for the glory, it's not for the medals, but it's for that sense of pride. It's knowing that if nothing else, when I compete, every last ounce of energy I have gets dumped into that competition. And I can walk away with my head held high, even if I don't medal, knowing that I left everything out there. And that feeling you get is just so euphoric that you just, it's untouchable. It's kind of like when my nephew was a little kid, like walking into the door and him running up to you and just giving you a hug. Like, it's just your world that can't be topped. And unfortunately, I don't have any kids yet, but we're working on it. Right. So pretty soon I'll have that family. And if I can balance competition and family at the same time and not take away from my family, that's going to be something I'm going to try and strive for. But if I have to hang everything up and walk away from the game with my hand held high,
absolutely,
then I can do it knowing that I left everything out there. I'm not quitting. I'm just reorganizing my priorities.
So I'm not sure whether you believe in fate or destiny, but do you feel that you've now identified a reason why you were a victim of that rocket attack, a reason, a purpose for you staying alive?
Every day I wonder how and why I survive. It's not something that I ever really have an answer for. And then I'll say something to somebody or I'll do something, like you said, not for any recognition or not for anything. And in this day and age of social media, it's so easy to put it out there. Yeah. And it's not like you're doing it for the glory or the gloating or, hey, look at me.
Yeah.
But you're doing it because you don't know who you're going to touch, who you're going to affect. And a couple weeks ago, as I was driving through from New York down to North Carolina, it's a total of 5 different states. And at every welcome sign to the state, I would do 22 push-ups in lieu of the 22 veterans that commit suicide every day here in the U.S.
Good Lord.
And just to try and raise a little awareness of something else. And when I got to the last state, second to last state, I only could knock out 18. And I felt like I was a failure. And I voiced my opinion about it. And as much as I was trying to self-talk and everything else, I kind of just had this great cloud over my head. Like, as much as I wanted to succeed, I still failed. And somebody reached out to me via Facebook message stating that how they're in California, they moved out there not too long ago, and how they're getting mental health before they moved to California. And from watching these videos, they realize that they need to get mental health again because they're starting to enter a dark place.
Yeah.
And it's little things like that. And I'm not saying you need the acknowledgement, but the acknowledgement definitely does help you realize why you survived when you have no inclination as to why you made it and the guy next to you didn't. So.
And that precisely is the meaning for the suffering that you've endured, isn't it? Because actually, whether you know it or not, there will be many, many, many lives touched by what you've been through and what you're doing and what you want to go on to do next. I mean, it is inspirational. So there's the meaning right there.
Yes, ma'am.
You received the prestigious Resilient Soldier of the Year award. What does resilience mean for you?
Resilience to me is finding a way. It's never giving up when all seems hopeless. And in my case, I ran into that problem multiple times in my life. And pre-injury, it was volunteering for deployments that kind of got me away from it and made me feel better. And then post-injury, it's one of the reasons why I say me losing my arm is the second best thing that ever happened to me. Because it actually forced me to truly be resilient.
Wow.
There was no running away. There was no avoiding it. And even when I tried to, at the end of the day, I still had to come to terms with everything and face it. And that's what resilience is. Knowing how hard something is and eventually coming to terms with it. And I'm glad I got the award when I did, and I didn't get it earlier, because then it wouldn't have meant as much, because I still would have thought like it was all a facade.
Yeah, sure.
Like I showed people what they needed to see when I wasn't dealing with things how I probably should have been dealing with them behind closed doors.
Yeah, like many people do that are suffering, that there's a certain presentation, isn't there, a facade, certainly.
Yeah, and then you end up living double lives, and ultimately, in some cases, because of the double lives you're trying to lead, you end up committing suicide because you just can't find a happy balance between everything. And fortunately for me, through sports, I've been able to find that balance. And through sports, it's also allowed me a way to be able to walk away from sports, competing,
Yeah.
be okay with it, because it's prolonged long enough for me to be okay with who I am and who I want to be and the legacy I want to leave behind.
If I could take you back in time magically, would you still have volunteered for Afghanistan?
Yes, ma'am. That's one thing I would never change. And even if you could take me back to the very moment when the rocket hit,
Yeah.
I would not change anything that happened to me. I honestly believe that I needed to lose my arm. I honestly believe everything that has happened in my life has happened for a reason. And me losing my arm is the second best thing that ever happened to me, next to my support system of family, girlfriend, and my sister's kids. But even if it was only to give my medic and mechanic one more day with their family, if there is anything I could change, it would be giving them one last chance to either survive or have one more day with their family. As per me, I wouldn't change anything that's happened to me at all. It's really been a godsend. As hard as it is for me to believe it at times, it truly is.
Thank you, Michael. That's absolutely staggering. Fantastic advice all round there, how you actually deal with adversity and how you've actually got your life off the ropes, and perhaps, by listening, other people can too. Before we say farewell, it's just a couple of questions that we ask all of our guests. If you don't mind, it's what philosophy underpins your life?
I think I would have to, and once again, I don't know if I heard it, if I read it, but I was granted today when I didn't have tomorrow. And on that path is where I found my new normal. And I think that philosophy that culminates to all my beliefs into how far I've come from who I was to who I am and what I want to leave behind.
What will your legacy be? What would you like it to be?
I'd like it to be something that I don't want to be famous. I don't want the monetary values, even though it's nice. I want to be that person when somebody looks at them or looks back and say, because of him, I tried something new. Because of him, I bettered myself, and I can now push myself to inspire others. And that's what I want my legacy to be. I don't need the fame and the records and everything else. Granted, they're nice, but I want to be that person that other people say, because of him, the world's a better place.
Beautiful. Has there been a particular book that's had a particular meaning, a lasting resonance for you?
I'm going to have to chalk this one up under TBI. There was a book I read when I first got injured, and I can't quite remember what it was, but it was basically this veteran's journey home, and it was a really short, maybe 120-page book. And the book was written about his PTSD, and it didn't have like a happy or a sad ending because it was written before I think he actually came to terms with everything.
Sure.
But the book was written about what he's going through.
Yeah.
And it still was at the time when the book finished. I honestly think that had a huge impact in me realizing, like, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one going through this. When I look back, I realize now I can be an advocate for something so much bigger than myself.
And what unfulfilled ambition continues to haunt you?
Being the king of the world.
Hey! You've still got time.
Honestly, like, my biggest ambition would really be to be able to make the Paralympic. With age creeping up on me, I'm battling something that's unconquered, which is time. And that's where I said I've come to terms with realizing I'm 34 now. I'm competing against 19 and 20-year-olds. So I'm happy with whatever the results may be. But the rest of my goals, they're still ahead of me. The gym teacher, the personal trainer, being a better person, being a father. A lot of my goals are still ahead of me, and my best days are still to come.
Beautiful. Thank you, Michael. It's been absolutely wonderful, truly wonderful and inspiring talking to you. I wish you all the best with your future plans and in the Invictus Games in Orlando. Good luck.
Thank you, Victoria.
And sincere thanks for listening today. Before you go, a small plea. We want to help as many people as possible discover their potential and overcome any adversity blocking their path. If you feel this episode could inspire someone else, please share it via the social media icons below. And if you're able to leave a review for the Off the Ropes podcast on iTunes, it will help us enormously to coax others to get off the ropes. And finally, if you'd like to receive weekly inspiring conversations drop into your inbox every Sunday night, please subscribe to the Off the Ropes podcast via iTunes or via the website. Thanks again. We wish you an inspiring day.